Hi everyone, my name is Rodrigo Moura. I'm the Chief Curator of El Museu del Barrio in New York, and today is my privilege to welcome you all to Raphael Montañez Ortiz, a contextual retrospective. I'm joined by the co-curator of the show, Julieta Gonzalez.
Thank you, Rodrigo, and we welcome you all to join us in this walkthrough around this exhibition of Ralph Montañez Ortiz.
The archaeological finds are among Montañez Ortiz's most important bodies of works and are central to his aesthetics. Executed between 1961 and 1965, they are the direct result of the physical interaction of the artist destroying objects during performative actions. These works push the notion of a finished autonomous art object towards a more porous definition of temporality. This idea is implied in the term archaeological find, that both alludes to the excavatory actions to which the objects have been subjected to, as well as the idea of ruins that they evoke.
The mattresses, sofas, and chairs presented here also reference domestic context and the human body. By destroying them, the artist believes to be releasing the spirits of objects and metonymically their users from their actual physical matter. In 1957, Montañez Ortiz chopped a 16mm film of a Hollywood Western movie into pieces using a tomahawk, a type of axe native to several indigenous groups in North America. He then placed the fragments into a medicine bag, randomly selecting and recomposing them together backwards and upside down, while chanting a Native American war cry. The resulting work, Cowboys and Indians, is shown here in this room, together with two other films from the late 1950s, Newsreel and Golf, in which the artist intervened found footage using radical gestures to deconstruct and challenge our perception of moving images in society.
The film works are presented here with wall pieces, where Raphael expands on the manipulation of space and time, experimenting with the grid, repetition of elements, found objects, and combustion. While these formal explorations belong to larger art historical narratives, including Dada's cut-up techniques, assemblage aesthetics, and abstract expressionism's debates around the pictorial plane, they also relate destruction to broader historical and political contexts. On another wall in this room, works by other artists promote a dialogue between Montañez Ortiz and destructive practices in different parts of the world. Performance has been at the center of Montañez Ortiz's artistic project since his archaeological find series, as documented in the original images of these works. Beginning with his prominent participation in the 1966 Destruction in Art Symposium, an interdisciplinary gathering led by artist Gustav Metzger in London, Montañez Ortiz's public performances grew in importance. His chair disassemblage and piano destruction concert are from this pivotal moment. Through these pieces, his work becomes more and more intertwined with his own image, which also led to a growing mass media presence through television broadcast appearances. Since then, the artist has conducted hundreds of performances in the United States, Europe, and Latin America, on the stage and in exhibition spaces, and taking on various personas, from entertainer to shaman. Montañez Ortiz performs these actions like rituals, and with his destructive gestures, often aimed at the piano, explores the instrument's sonic potentialities and strong association with Western ideals of high culture.
Montañez Ortiz's self-perception of his mixed identity, born in New York, of Puerto Rican, Mexican, and Native American ancestry, is at the foundation of his decolonial agenda, particularly considering Puerto Rico's colonial relation with the US. For him, Latinos had been cut off from their authentic artistic roots, disenfranchised by class and racial bigotry. Authenticating art, a term he coined, would thus unshackle their minds from patriarchal Eurocentrism and become a means to emancipate them from the colonial condition. These imperatives guided the original concept of El Museu del Barrio in 1969. Its artistic, pedagogical, and community endeavor sustained by a conception of culture that affirmed difference as a cultural resource. This section of the exhibition highlights his foundational gesture, as well as Montañez Ortiz's involvement in the Art Workers Coalition, Judson Publications, and the Guerrilla Art Action Group, alongside material from other organizations in the New York Puerto Rican diasporic community, including the Taller Boricua and the Young Lords. Like the work of many of his peers at the time, Montañez Ortiz's practice was informed by decolonial struggles and the anti-Vietnam War movement and solidarity with the then called Third World, leading to the engagement with guerrilla tactics in his performative works. In his PhD thesis, Montañez Ortiz defines the notion of ethnoaesthetics as a strategy of resistance to the spurious or inauthentic nature of Western consumer culture. This concept is also understood as a decolonial strategy, a return to art's complex of prehistoric and historic root cultures, and to nature, which in ancient cultures was considered an ally and an essential element of cohesion in the community. Following the colonial order and the genocide of native populations in the Americas, art made by indigenous peoples was consigned to the Ethnographic Museum, where it was otherized and considered minor, worthy of study only as a manifestation of so-called primitive cultures.
By challenging these notions and approaching the philosophical framework of these cultures, that is, the integration of art and myth, Raphael Montañez Ortiz feathered Maya's emis, referred to his own ethnic background. These seminal works are placed in the center of this gallery, creating a dialogue with other artists presented here, whose practices equally contribute to the destabilization of Western art historical narratives. Also on display, holdings from El Museo del Barrio's Taino collection point to the museum's core mission of connecting the Caribbean diaspora with its cultural background, something outlined in Montañez Ortiz's early vision for the institution.
Physiocycle Alchemy is one of Montañez Ortiz's main contributions to contemporary art. This concept runs through several decades of his production, and in the 1980s it resulted in performative works that relied on shamanic healing, meditation, breathing, rituals, and the dream, psychoanalysis, as well as what Montañez Ortiz described as the ethnoaesthetic, which constitute the underpinnings of this approach to art making. Documentation of several of these performative and participatory works spans a vast chronology and occupies a wall in this gallery.
Also on display in this gallery are 3 examples of the artist's more recent large-scale assemblages, where he deconstructs model houses purchased online. Denoting a psychoanalytic inflection and a particular interest in domestic context, these works refer to his early archaeological finds shown elsewhere in the exhibition. Works by artists Maria Teresa Incapié and Laura Anderson Barbata address these notions from different perspectives, from a cathartic unleashing of the power of domestic objects to the recuperation of ancestral myths through a collective process as a form of healing for a Yanomami community that has been imperiled by the extractive exploitation of its ancestral lands.
The ideas that informed the concept of physiocycle alchemy run throughout Montañez Ortiz's production, starting in the late 1950s when he subjected footage from films to a sacrificial ritual, splicing the random fragments to create other films born of that cathartic experience. Renewal by ritual destruction would become a recurrent field of experimentation for him, resulting in sculptural installation and performative works. In the 1980s, he took his early experiences with film to the domain of laserdisc video technology, working with the idea of scratching as a virtual gesture, enabled by an electronic joystick. The ritual of chopping, chanting, and dancing to release the evil from the found film footage in his early work was translated in his later videos to a manipulation of sound and image that could potentially induce a trance-like state in the viewer.
Also presented in this room are works from the digital painting series, where the artist explores visual manifestations of systems of belief to create immersive, electronically generated graphic works. Thanks everyone for joining us for this virtual walkthrough of Raphael Montañez Ortiz, a contextual retrospective. We hope to see you soon at El Museo del Barrio.